longer, does the U.S. believe it will be a detriment as Netanyahu makes decisions?
I think that remains to be seen.
We take a big step enacting the kinds of policies that can reverse the harm of the past and to help us to work together to build a brighter future.
Anyone who attacks an officer, whether on the Capitol grounds or any place else in the country, should serve time.
Hello, everybody. I'm Weijia Jiang at the White House, and welcome to America Decides. We are joining you just a little bit late today due to some technical difficulties, but thank you so much for rolling with us. We are so happy that you're here. Let's begin tonight in Florida, where former President Donald Trump met with House Speaker Mike Johnson behind closed doors at Mar-a-Lago today. On the agenda, the House Republicans' razor-thin majority and the uphill climb to retain control of the chamber next year. The meeting comes as Trump works to peel away black voters from President Biden, with new polling showing the president is losing some more support among this key voting group.
We've done more for, and I say this, I say it proudly, more for the black population than any president since Abraham Lincoln. That's a big statement. And crooked Joe Biden has done nothing for you except talk. It's only talk.
We'll have much more on the importance of the black vote coming up. But right now, Olivia Rinaldi joins us from Palm Beach, Florida, where you are spending a lot of time, Olivia. So Speaker Johnson was in Mar-a-Lago today. What do we know about this meeting, especially since these two guys just spent time together here in Washington?
Yeah, good evening, Weijia. We are here at Mar-a-Lago, where Speaker Johnson just wrapped up a meeting with Donald Trump. And I'm told some of that meeting was about that razor-thin majority in the House or the House of Representatives that Republicans hold. It's just a few seats that they hold that's giving them the majority there. Speaker Johnson just posting a little bit ago that is something they spoke. Now, briefly after that meeting wrapped up and Johnson posted that, Trump posted a slew of endorsements on Truth Social, endorsing several Republican House congressional members that are in tough primaries, giving them their backing. Yeah, I do want to point out one in particular, and that's Bob Good's district in Virginia 5. He is getting, that primary race is starting tomorrow, and Trump has had some issues with Bob Good in the past. Representative Good is someone who has had a bit of a contentious relationship with Donald Trump. He endorsed Ron DeSantis, Trump's primary challenger, on one of the days where Trump was indicted. Trump never really forgot that and has vowed to keep Bob Good out of Congress. He has backed John McGuire, who is a Virginia state senator who is also running in that race. And in fact, Trump is even holding a tele-rally for McGuire tonight, trying to give him that final push to get over the finish line tomorrow in that primary in Virginia District 5.
And Olivia, we also know that the Biden campaign came out today with a brand new ad calling former President Trump a convicted felon. How is the Trump team responding to that?
You know, Trump advisors I've spoken to about convicted felon and that word and how they're going to combat that on the campaign trail, they tell me that it really doesn't matter for them and that their voters don't care about it. The Biden campaign is banking on being able to say and call Trump a convicted felon over and over and over again, and that will have some impact on some of those independent voters. But I spoke with the Trump source earlier today about how that's playing, and he told me, well, you know, Democrats have been calling Trump a criminal for the past, 4+, 8+ years, and that's already baked into some voters' minds, that calling him a convicted felon now might not really play. So really interesting there that the Biden campaign is doubling down on calling him that to try to sway some of those independent voters away from Trump and saying that this might be too much for them to stomach for him voting.
Olivia Rinaldi on the campaign trail in Florida. Thank you so much. Former President Donald Trump made a fresh pitch to black voters in the battleground state of Michigan over the weekend. CBS News' Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us now. Anthony, it's great to see you. We've been hearing so much about how key groups might vote in November. But can you tell us what this poll says about how they're thinking about whether their lives will be impacted, whether they will be better off, depending on who wins?
Hey there, Weijia. Yes, because, look, we're in that part of the campaign. We start talking about polls and demographic breaks out of them, right? So here's our latest. These are the support numbers among black voters, among women. You see Joe Biden doing very well among black voters, not quite at his 2020 numbers, but high. Among women, again, not quite at his 2020 numbers, but still a majority. We wanted then to put a little context around this and ask, well, do people think in these terms about whether or not they'd be better off? Let me show you this. If Joe Biden wins, do people think his policies will make things better for? Here are some key Democratic groups, right? And by and large, if you're voting for Joe Biden, yeah, maybe this isn't a big surprise. You, by and large, think that things will be better for young people as opposed to the same, certainly not worse in your mind, right? For black voters, they think things will be better, a majority. But take a look at this if you're voting for Donald Trump. If you're for Trump, you think things are going to be better for just about every group that we listed, and by very sizable numbers. Better for young people, better for Hispanic voters, better for black voters, etc. This is important, Weege, because I want to go back to the Biden numbers here. I think I'm going to keep an eye on these, especially things like, will things be better as opposed to just the same for some of those key groups like young people? Let's see if those better numbers can go up a little higher, too, because that's what people are going to see as a transactional thing for their vote. Do things get better for them like that, Ouija?
Anthony, thank you so much for that very fascinating look at how people are thinking about this. Well, the rules are set for the first Biden-Trump debate. The question now, will the candidates stick to them? You're streaming America Decides. But there are just 10 days until the first presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. CNN has announced additional rules for the June 27th showdown in Atlanta. Candidates' microphones will be muted except for when it's their turn to speak. There will be 2 commercial breaks, but campaign staff may not interact with their candidates during them. And no props will be permitted on stage, but each candidate will receive a pen, a notepad, and a bottle of water. Our Finn Gomez, political director, joins us now. Finn, tell us about these two sides. Are they ready to play ball with these rules?
You're absolutely right, Weege. It's only 10 days until the first debate between these two, and if you recall, this is the first time that either of these two have had a debate since the 2020 cycle. And if you recall, those 2 debates that occurred during that cycle, it was quite bombastic. It was both were very aggressive, and so now we are in the midst of the lead up to this seismic debate that could have seismic consequences. We do know in terms of preparation that they're both campaigns are essentially have different strategies and methods to how they're preparing their candidates for this debate in just 10 days in Atlanta, Georgia. President Biden has Ron Klain, his former chief of staff, is running points on the preparation for President Biden. They're doing a more traditional form where there's going to essentially that lead up week before the 27th. They're going to be essentially going down in preparation and sort of hunkering down, and getting ready for that. And we do know that on the other side, Donald Trump is essentially is doing more of his unorthodox methods to prepare for the debate. There hasn't been more of a traditional preparation session where you're essentially circled by either advisors or people playing the parts of their opponents. Donald Trump has mainly been speaking to advisors or key policy folks, including Senator Marco Rubio last week during his visit to the RNC, where they had a discussion on policy. But just 10 days away, Ouija, and it's expected to be a pretty significant event.
Well, especially because, Finn, we should also note that there is not going to be a live audience, right? So there's not going to be that reaction, the pause for applause or boos or what have you. Before I let you go, I want to ask you about Trump's Veep stake, because so far, I think there's a short list, is that right, of who he might announce?
There is a short list. I mean, right now we know that there's about 7 or 8 of the potential candidates who have been vetted or received vetting documents. Of those 8, there's been really a lot of attention towards Tim Scott, the South Carolina Senator, J.D. Vance, his colleague from Ohio, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, and also Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. And those two are those several are really getting the focus right now, we've been told. But ultimately, Weija, as you know, there is a sense that the ultimate decision will be made by the presumptive nominee. But yes, there's a lot of maneuvering over the last several days, Weija, with this short list potentially getting shorter, and the expectation we should hear the announcement made either during the convention or just before the convention. Weija.
Thank you so much, Finn. You know that we'll check back with you as soon as there's news on that. Well, could the blue wall in Minnesota, New Jersey, and Virginia be about to fall? Our congressional correspondent Scott McFarland has been talking with lawmakers who believe Donald Trump could have the Democrats seeing red in those states. He'll join us next on America Decides. Several high-profile Democrats are pushing back on what they say are bold claims Donald Trump made last week on Capitol Hill, that he could flip historically blue states this November. Our Scott McFarland has more on this. Scott, great to see you. Republicans say Trump is competitive in New Jersey, Virginia, and Minnesota. How are they supporting their claims that these states can be flipped in November?
It's hard to know what to make of this, Weija, because it's somewhere between fan fiction, preposterous, or during the fog of war of a campaign. Everything seems possible, and every fear of each party can come true. Take a listen to one of the people in the room for Trump's meeting on Capitol Hill with House Republicans, a possible vice presidential hopeful, Byron Donalds of Florida.
So looking at polling, talking with people around the country, I think New Hampshire's a real situation. I'm hearing some positive things out of Minnesota. Michigan, I think, is much more in play than it's been in the last couple cycles. Actually got a call from a couple friends of mine in New Jersey, and they're like, "Hey, are you guys doing anything in New Jersey? Like, it's a real thing here." And so I think Americans just want to get our country back on track. They're tired of everything being political. I think people want to just have a country where our economy is strong, prices are under control, the rule of law actually is being followed and makes sense and is honorable, and people have other things to discuss than just bare knuckles, hard-nosed politics.
This is such a common campaign technique to try to expand the map or allege you've expanded the map to distract your opponent into spending resources where he or she shouldn't be spending resources. But two things we know for sure, Weija. First of all, a lot of our sources in the room told us there was a good chunk of these meetings on Capitol Hill with Trump Thursday spent on that topic. And secondly, there is an optimism among Republicans about the softness of President Biden's numbers and an aspiration to do more than just reach 207.
Scott, I imagine fan fiction and optimism are a couple euphemisms for how Democrats would describe that claim, and you've spoken to several of them. What are they saying?
Well, we made the rounds, and some actually went out of their way to call us. In Minnesota, a number of the Democrats said the polls may indicate closeness, but that Minnesota has and remains a blue state statewide. Has the longest string of voting for Democratic presidential candidates all the way back to 1972. Governor Tim Walz told us that he's bullish on President Biden's chances, that Minnesota is not a state Donald Trump plays well in when he's airing his grievances and issuing his complaints. But also, the Democratic National Committee and several House members from Minnesota told me if Trump wants to spend his money in a blue state, knock yourself out. You will squander resources that are better used elsewhere. And they say New Jersey and Virginia are much closer to that category I coined fan fiction.
Scott McFarland, we got a campaign. Thank you so much. Maryland's governor pardons thousands of marijuana convictions. Why the governor says the move is righting historical wrongs in the state. You're streaming America Decides. Maryland's governor today pardoned more than 175,000 marijuana convictions. Democratic Governor Wes Moore signed the executive order this morning forgiving all individuals in the state with misdemeanor convictions for the possession of marijuana or drug paraphernalia. This is the largest state pardon to date, according to his administration. Skylar Henry is in Washington. Skylar, great to see you. I know you spoke with the governor. What other details should we know about today's historic action out of Maryland?
Hey, Weisha, good to see you. Yeah, this really targets some 175,000+ convictions that the governor said that he wanted to address, lower-level marijuana convictions that he ultimately came out to say were impacting generations of people as far as how they move with everything from job applications to rental applications and so many things that have happened in their everyday life. And so now we know that this pardon will now address some 100,000 Marylanders, if not a bit more than that, particularly in areas that have black and brown or more black and brown communities. We're talking about Baltimore City, Prince George's County in Maryland, and elsewhere. When you break down the numbers, this is something that the governor, as well as those within his administration, have said that they want to continue to work on in various capacities, especially considering that these convictions really stay on people's records for some time now. And so as for how this will all work, we know that there is an electronic docket that will exist for every individual that has this conviction on their record. They say that it will be reflected as far as the pardon within the next couple of weeks. And then ultimately they will be able to get that second chance. We talked to the governor about why now? Why is it so important to actually have this happen in this moment? He said that for far too long, this disparity, if you will, this gap, if you will, especially as it relates to race, has existed, particularly in the state of Maryland. And so now he's hoping to be a torchbearer, if you will, as far as the state, hoping that other states will follow. Remember, Weisha, you know this all too well. President Biden did something similar on the federal level a couple of years ago. So the governor looking to follow suit.
And Skylar, you also asked the governor to weigh in on the Maryland Senate race, in which his Republican predecessor, Larry Hogan, is facing off against Democratic County Executive Angela Alsobrooks. Here's a bit of what he had to say.
I like the old governor, but I do think this is the thing that people don't like about politics, is that when you say that you're not going to run for Senate for years, and then because you say they don't get anything done, and then the day of the filing deadline, you announce you're running for Senate. When you're recruited by Mitch McConnell and endorsed by Donald Trump and say that you'll caucus with the Republican Party and give the Senate Republicans the majority, but then you call yourself an independent. I mean, this is the kind of thing that people don't like about it.
And what else did Governor Moore say about why he's endorsing Alsobrooks for this seat?
Yeah, really, this is ultimately an endorsement of character, according to the governor. He said that the county executive really has stuck by her word up until this point, and that is why he felt as if he should throw his name behind her in terms of that open U.S. Senate seat. Remember, this is a former governor in Larry Hogan that had wide support on both sides of the aisle during his time as governor. But Governor Moore has said that he simply wants someone who is consistent with their word. And it's not only with that, but also their record, pointing to the work that she was able to do while she was county executive of Prince George's County. But to reiterate, he said that he did not dislike the former governor, only that he chose to throw his support behind the county executive, especially as you look ahead to this race in November. Now, we should point out here that the former President Trump, has thrown his endorsement behind former Governor Hogan. He said that he doesn't want Trump's support, and that will continue to be the case, even if they want more Republicans to sign on. We'll see ultimately how it shakes out as we look ahead to November.
And that is remarkable, Skylar, given the history that Hogan and Trump have. It's not exactly a friendly one. But thank you so much for your reporting.
You bet.
The U.S. Surgeon General is calling for a warning label to be put on social media sites. Vivek Murthy will join us next with more on why he's speaking out about some of our most used apps. You're streaming America Decides. In a new op-ed, the U.S. Surgeon General is calling on Congress to take action and pass legislation that would put a warning label on social media apps. Earlier, our Caitlin Huey-Burns spoke with U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy.
And the U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy joins us now. Dr. Murthy, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time.
Of course, very glad to be with you today.
So what would you like this warning label to specifically say, and what kind of impact do you think this label could have?
Well, first, let's talk about why this is important. What we are living through right now is a youth mental health crisis, and social media has unfortunately emerged as one of the contributors to that crisis. Last year, when I issued an advisory on youth mental health and social media, I noted that when young people, adolescents in particular, are spending more than 3 hours a day on social media, that's associated with a doubling of risk of anxiety and depression symptoms. And what's the average use right now? It's 4.8 hours a day. So we have reason to be concerned, but the warning label is important to help parents know about the risks, to know that the harmful content that kids are often exposed to, whether it's violent or sexual content, the bullying and harassment that many of them experience online, and the excessive use that's often engendered by features that would seek to manipulate their brains into excessive use. All of this is contributing to these mental health strains, and parents and kids have I think, a right to know about the harms that they're enduring.
And then I want to see if you can provide a little bit of context to kind of the urgency that you're calling for this. I'm curious. I mean, how often is a warning from the Surgeon General label, that kind of label, how often is it applied?
Well, it is unusual to apply a Surgeon General's warning label, but we find ourselves in a unique and unusual situation. This youth mental health crisis that we are living through, with extraordinarily high rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide among young people, this has become the defining public health challenge of our time. And a warning label is one part of a larger set of solutions that we need to make social media safe for our kids. Last year, I called on Congress to put in place safety standards and data transparency requirements that would help to achieve that goal of making social media safer. And the good news is that we've done this kind of thing in the past. When it comes to cars, for example, we didn't just accept that the high rate of car accident-related deaths that we were seeing in the 70s and 80s were just a natural part of modernity. We didn't assume that we had to live with that. We said we can make cars safer, and we established the independent standards and enforced them that got us seatbelts and airbags and crash testing and a host of other measures. We've got to take that same step here, and we've got to do that with urgency because our kids' health and well-being is at stake.
And as you mentioned, you have been calling on Congress to take action on this issue for a while. As you know, and as you've noted, this kind of label would need to be approved by Congress. How have you spoken to lawmakers about this? What's been the reception? And do you have confidence that they could actually pass something here?
Well, this label would require congressional approval, and that is similar to the labels that we have for tobacco and for alcohol. And by the way, the data from that experience with tobacco and alcohol tell us that labels can, in fact, be effective at increasing awareness and changing behavior. But when it comes to Congress acting on this, look, I have had conversations for several years with members of Congress about social media. There's bipartisan interest and concern about what's happening in terms of impact on youth mental health. And I think we are seeing more momentum now than at any time in the last 20 years to actually doing something to make social media safer. So I find all of that encouraging. But my message to Congress is that we have to act with urgency. The most important thing we've got to do is make social media safer with safety standards. But we also have to warn parents and kids about the harms, and that is where a warning label comes in. I recognize that this is an unusual year to call for action like this. I recognize that this is a complicated issue. But the truth is, when I think about the moms and dads and the kids that I've met across the country who are struggling with the mental health harms of social media, to them, they don't care that it's hard or it's complex. What they want, understandably, is a safer environment for their kids. And that is not an unreasonable thing for parents to want. It's why all of us, regardless of how complicated this may be, need to step up and take action to make social media safer. Because as a parent, I can't think of anything that is more important than safeguarding the mental health and well-being of our kids. And that is what is on the table right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, you're a parent, I'm a parent. I think we're all wondering, in the meantime, without a label, what should parents do? What should teachers, school administrators do to address what you are calling a mental health crisis among young people?
Yeah, so in the op-ed that I wrote today for the New York Times, I actually laid out a number of steps that all of us can take while we're waiting for Congress to do its part. When it comes to schools, keeping phones and social media out of learning time, in particular in schools, is really vital to protecting not just learning, but also time where kids can actually build relationships with one another and get to know one another. As parents, we can take steps too. We can, if our kids are not on social media, delay the use of social media until after middle school at least. That's the approach we are planning to take with our kids. If our kids are already on social media, what you can do is to create tech-free zones in your child's life to protect areas that are vital for their development, like sleep, in-person interaction, and physical activity. This could look like saying that meal times when we're all together are going to be times where we put away our devices. It could look like saying an hour before bedtime and throughout the night, we're going to take away devices and give them back in the morning to protect the quality and quantity of sleep. But most importantly, Caitlin, we have to do this together as parents. This work is hard. It's not easy to do on your own, especially when your child comes up to you and says, everyone else is on social media. Do you want me to be the only one who's left out? But if we together as parents make a pact to say, these are measures we are going to take together for our kids, not only is it easier for us, but it's easier for our kids too, because they know that they won't be alone.
Well, that does it for us today, but we'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.